A cafe conversation. A cafe conversation. It's a cafe conversation in the ladies' room. 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 A cafe conversation in the ladies' room.
Good evening, and welcome to Cafe Conversations with the Ladies Room. I'm your host, Cherise. My co-host, Samantha, couldn't be with us tonight, but she'll be back soon next week. Yeah, next show. But anyway, I got a cafe full of folks. Some old friends came back to join me tonight, and I'm so happy to see them here with me in the cafe. Welcome, Mr. Vincent Ford. How are you?
I'm doing well. And when you say old friends, you mean knowing you old or the fact that some of your friends are old? I just want to make sure I understood.
Well, let's just say that we've been friends for a while. How about
Okay.
that?
There
I
you
want to
go.
be safe. And Dr. Michelle Strongfields, welcome back to the cafe. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me back. And I was going to ask the same question because I just had a birthday, so I'm a little touchy about.
I got you. I got you. No,
Oh,
again,
please.
like I said, us being friends, friends for a little while.
Oh,
And so
okay.
that's what I mean by
I'll
old
take
friends,
that.
okay? And Sabrina Barnes, how are you this evening?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back on the Cafe Conversations.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I'm telling you, the cafe is jumping tonight. I love Thursday nights. I love Thursday nights. And my good friend Aisha, Miss Aisha Kamar, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me tonight. It's an exciting topic. And just in case we haven't been acquainted, for everyone out there and Dr. Strongfields, I'm Aisha, and I'm so excited to discuss tonight's topic with you and hear from you, really.
Oh, perfect. So, because we have such a variety of experience in the community on the panel tonight, in the conversation, if you all could just take a minute or two to tell everyone else in the cafe about yourself and who you are, what you do. Let's start with you, Mr. Ford, and work our way around.
All righty. Well, good evening again. Vincent Ford. I'm the retired CEO of a consulting firm that did diversity and inclusion training and leadership development training for most of the Fortune 500 companies. It's been a whirlwind of an experience, traveled all over the world for it. And now I'm at the point, if I never see another airplane again, that's fine with me. But it's been a whirlwind. I've written a book on the issue of diversity and inclusion, and it's been a fun career.
Oh, so this conversation must be right up your alley then.
It's something that I have a lot of interest in, and I may have an opinion or two.
I'm excited to hear it. And Dr. Strongfields, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
I am, can you hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I'm Michelle Strongfields. I'm an MD. I worked kind of internationally. I worked with PAHO and the World Health Organization on infectious disease. Came back to the States and decided I wanted to teach and started a STEM nonprofit, the Science, Technology, Education, and nonprofit. We've been in existence for a pretty good long time now, trying to show children of color where they belong in the scheme of things in STEM, trying to be reflective, trying to provide mentorship and We started a scholarship fund about 20 years ago. In fact, this is our 20th year anniversary.
Nice.
Yeah, and so we started as a small, excuse me, it's still relatively small, but what we do is more than just material. We follow the young people throughout their post-secondary experience. We provide mentors for them. You know, we're friends, they become family. So some kids we want to get rid of, we can't shake them, they keep coming back. But the important thing is that they become mentors for the people after them.
Oh, awesome.
So,
nice.
That's me.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
glad
so
to be here tonight.
Awesome. So then I'm sure you have a pretty in-depth opinion also about our topic tonight. Working with so many different people.
I absolutely do. Now, let me just give this caveat, is that before I went to med school, I was a burned out public school teacher. I decided that I wanted to do something bigger than, not bigger, because classroom teachers are heroes in my estimation. But I just felt like I wasn't giving my all to what I wanted to do with young people.
Gotcha.
So at a ripe old age with a bunch of kids, I decided to go back to school and go to med school.
Okay. Never too old to start something new.
Sometimes it is.
Miss Sabrina
Sometimes you are.
Barnes. Hey, would you mind introducing yourself to the cafe?
Yeah, so yes, my name is Sabrina Barnes. I'm a social worker, currently working in the mental health field. So I'm a social worker, mental health advocate. I'm also a life coach, part-time, and I also help with some social media management now. So in a nutshell, that's who I am. But I'm a strong mental health background. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Oh, I can't, I'm telling you, I'm so excited about the topic. Okay, wait. So Aisha.
Yes.
Hi, good evening. Would you mind introducing yourself, giving a little bit of your background?
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to introduce. Absolutely. So I am a mom of 3 kids. You heard that right. So that fits in today's topic, I think, because nature versus nurture, we're talking about behaviors and all of that. So I think I have a thing or two to say about that. I am by profession an insurance agent, and also I do investments for clients. We help build financial houses for people in our community. And my day job is office manager. So it's dealing with a lot of people, so this topic is definitely relevant.
Oh, awesome. Well, I thank you all for being here with us tonight in the cafe. Thank all of you who are watching the show. Please, we'd like you to call in with your questions. If you have any, you could reach us at 570-731-3060. We have someone standing by to take your questions. We'd love to hear from you. But let's get started with the topic tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk about nature versus nurture. And in talking about nature versus nurture, I'm sure we all have met someone that, they have certain characteristics about them, and you kind of just say to yourself, were they born like that, or is that something that they learned in the house? And this can be applied to many different situations, many different situations that we will, talk about during the show tonight. But, first and foremost, I kind of want to put the question out there to all of you and just get some feedback of what you think. Does our genetic mapping dictate our behavior, or does our behavior create our environment? Do we create the environment based on what's inside of us, or is it what we live, or what's already inside of us that's creating our environment? But what do you think? What do you think? And you know what? Let's start with Sabrina.
Okay. So yeah, I definitely I know it has been like a long-term debate whether, and especially in the psychology world, um, nature versus nurture. Um, I definitely stand on is definitely both,
Mhm.
because your nature could definitely shape, and as far as nature is, just what's around you, your environment, things like that, can definitely play a factor in just how you react, how you respond to certain things.
Right.
And it can also be genetics as well. You can have certain traits passed down, genetically. So I definitely think that is both. It's definitely both.
Mhm. Okay. Dr. Strongfields. Oh, you're muted.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
there you
Yeah, yeah. I was listening. I was listening very closely to the mental health professional because this is an age-old argument,
go.
and
Mhm.
if we take a look at what it is, like in a nutshell. Now, I don't want to like I have a bunch of dry sciencey stuff. I don't want to do that to you, but but when we talk about nature, we're talking about genes and gene expression.
Mhm.
And so, but where nature, where the environment impacts, nurture impacts, is that you have a set of genes, and let's say they're genes for intelligence, for genius even. But if
Mhm.
you're in an environment where they shut you in a closet from birth, or give you very little stimuli, very little interaction, what impact is that going to have on your genetic expression? Um, and so that's where you see the interplay between the two. For example, maybe a few years ago, we started hearing lots of studies about how um, stress and trauma impacts your genetics. They call it epigenetics. The
Right.
impact of your genetics, the impact of these traumatic experiences on what you inherited and how they cause an interplay. So there is a huge discussion that we can have about it. I used to be, very sciencey on the side of, it's the genetics until I started working with young people on a regular basis and see the impact of environmental whatever. If you have what people may consider, with people who get, young people who get, let's say, adopted into a loving and warm and caring home, that could change that child's trajectory in life.
Right.
They could be labeled as low intelligence. I mean, they slap all kinds of labels on children,
Right.
but put them in an environment where the expectation is for them to excel. Put them someplace where they're provided with what we consider a good home. And let's see what that nurture has to do, even on someone who, given their genetic inheritance, may have low expectations placed upon them. So I told you I could get real sciencey. This is something really close to my heart. It's something that social scientists discuss ad nauseum. So yeah, this is a really good topic tonight.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back to that in a moment. I want to give everyone else a chance to answer the question. Then I kind of want to come back to the concept of changing the environment and that changing, the blueprint of this person's behavior and stuff like that. Mr. Ford, would you mind sharing with us your thoughts?
Not a problem whatsoever. I fall on the side of everything is a learned behavior. That I don't buy the fact that people are born racist, that people are born intelligent, and that even in the poorest environment, they're going to still show their intelligence. I think what the doctor's saying that is right on target is that you take somebody with high IQ, put them in a not in a family orientation, even in a school system where they are not empowered, then they're going to lose it. So for me, I'm a behaviorist. I do believe that how we behave is learned. We learn how to speak from our parents and the surroundings, sometimes from television. We learn how to accept or reject certain things. We learn the foods that we like versus the foods that we dislike. It's a learned behavior. I don't think people are born not liking Brussels sprouts. Well, wait a minute. Maybe I was born not liking Brussels sprouts. That's not a good example. But I think everything is a learned behavior. That's my nutshell.
Okay. Aisha?
Well,
Uh-oh.
I think we lost you.
my 3 kids, and they're being
There you
raised
go.
in the same, they're being, and before I actually begin, I do agree with you, Vincent. I do believe that it is, nurture is a behavior. Like, I believe that nurture is what shapes the individual character, and the environment that I've been, or, you know, we've been giving our children does shape, you know, their character and their behaviors. However, they're very individual, like they're very different from each other. And I think that, you know, what kind of supports the nurture idea is also the different friends that they have. And I see the differences in their behavioral patterns, just even in the little difference that they have within each other. But I agree with you. I think nurture is what shapes the individual character.
So how do we then, and I want to kind of go back to Dr. Strongfield's point of changing the environment. If you change someone's environment, you can change their behavior. So how do we account for when the behavior doesn't change, even though you change the environment? Would you say that that is a result of what's inside them? You know, because I mean, and I'll give you an example. You know, you have someone who has a really bad attitude, someone who, you know, just gets really angry and does destructive things. And they've been doing this since they were a child, you know, and despite, you know, let's say therapy, despite corrective actions from whomever, despite, you know, whatever environment they're in, they still, you know, continue to act in this way, and it gets worse as they get older. Would you say that? What is your opinion on that?
Excuse me, may I ask? I wanted to ask the social worker, because she has far more expertise probably than I. But I wanted to ask the question: how then do you account for? I mean, because this is part of my argument for why I'm not completely a behaviorist. How do you account then for a child who's labeled a sociopath or a psychopath, who's raised in a loving? I think that's part of what you were asking, Sharice.
Yes.
So, you know, how is that accounted for? I mean, in medicine, well, not just medicine, but in genetics, there's something called a phenotype versus a genotype. I mean, how does that have any significance in these things that we're discussing? And I wanted to ask the sister with the social science background.
That's a great question, which was pretty much the question I was putting out to Dr. Strongfields. But yeah, how do you account for that?
Yeah, so that's why I said I believe it's a little bit of both, because genetic wise, you can have certain predispositions as far as you know, as far as mental health and things like that, being diagnosed with mental illness. So if someone has a diagnosis of a mental illness and they are in the right environment, they may not ever be able to just fully operate as if someone who didn't have a diagnosis, but their environment can definitely give them a better quality of life, you know, for them. Because, you know, one person with that doesn't have a diagnosis, you put them in an environment that is nurturing and loving and caring and things like that, then their quality of life will be, you know, better than someone who does have a diagnosis, and you put them in the same loving environment, it doesn't necessarily mean that that they're going to be on that same level. If that makes sense. But when you but it'll be better for them, because they can, if we're talking about a child, that same child can be in a not caring environment and they can decline, but they can be in the right type of environment and they can excel, even if it's not on the level as the child who does not have any type of psychiatric diagnosis or anything like that.
So
I'm sorry, Sharice, I was thinking about all the twin studies that have been done. Where
Okay.
these people are genetically identical, and one has one set of behaviors and the other a total, maybe not totally different, but another set of behaviors. Obvious, so that makes the argument a little more ambiguous. They're in the same loving, nurturing environment, as the sister just said, but their genetics, their genotype maybe dictates the fact that they have antisocial behavior or altruistic behavior. We haven't found the gene for altruism yet. So I have to hover on the fence for this argument, because I'm the mother of a lot of kids, and so and so they're raised in the same environment, they're same parents, the same kind of discipline, the same kind of reward system. And I swear to you, it's as if each of these kids parachuted in from another planet. Yeah, I was like, where did that come from? And I'm sure any parent with more than one kid can probably attest to that. And what do we ascribe that to? Do we say that, well, maybe it's because this form of discipline hits this kid differently than that. This kind of cuddling and it doesn't affect this one child. What do we attribute all that to?
And I agree with that to a certain extent, that like each child or person has to be treated differently. What works for you doesn't work for me, doesn't work for Mr. Ford, doesn't work for Aisha, doesn't work for Sabrina, but I also do believe, and you can let me know what you think, I also do believe that some things just cannot be changed about a person. No matter how much intervention you do, no matter how much you change that person's environment. And that's even if the person wants to be changed, because there are some people that I really honestly do believe are a certain way because they feel that they're supposed to be a certain way because they're in a certain environment. So having to be in that environment causes them to act a certain way, or to speak a certain way, or to live a certain way, and I don't necessarily believe all of it is environmental, because I do believe that the same way someone can be extremely intelligent as a result of genetics, they there are those that may have learning disabilities as a result of those same genetics, as a result of their genetics. What about we talked a little bit about medicine, about
before you go on, Sheree, before you go into another one, let me just chime in on one part of it.
Sure.
Yeah, Dr. Strongfield's brought up a good point about the twins. So let's take the situation of the identical twins, which again, same genetic makeup. There have also been studies that have taken genetically identical twins, raised them in different households, and their behavior patterns are extraordinarily different. Why? Because they have had some learned behaviors. The other aspect that I like to take a look at is the issue of the peer group, especially once they start school age. they are with their peer group more than they are with mom and dad. So the peer
Okay.
group becomes a big influencer in their lives, and the degree to which they get rewards and or punishments for some of those behaviors shape that behavior. Take a look at those that join gangs versus those that don't. Then take a look at how gangs reinforce the behavior that they want and how they punish the behaviors that they don't want. You know, so I'm still a big proponent that it is all behavior, it's all learned. And that's my weird, strange, and aberrant view.
I don't know. I might have to disagree with you a little bit on that. Okay. And I'm going to say, take for instance, the child, okay, that happens to love doing harm to animals. Just, you know what I'm saying? And if this child has just, especially if they're an only child, and they're exhibiting these, how can I say, violent behaviors, you really think that's necessarily learned, especially if they're not seeing it? I mean, I do believe
They're
that people
seeing
can
it.
be
Oh, yeah, they
born,
are.
huh?
They're seeing it.
Not necessarily, because I know some people who are just mean and they have the sweetest parents, you know, but they're still mean kids. And I believe there are mean kids. And if we're saying that it starts from them being younger, you know, and what they're exposed to when they're younger, well, if they're not exposed to any kind of violence, they're coming from a loving household and all like that, but they still turn around and end up a serial killer, you know, could we really say that's environmental and not maybe something inside?
Or if you have a family of more than one child and one is a serial killer and the other isn't,
Right.
How do you account for that?
Exactly.
We haven't teased out the truth of what it is about this stuff for behavior in medicine yet. You know, it could be that there's a dominant gene that makes you, or a recessive gene. If you inherit two of the recessive genes, then you're a serial killer. Or I mean, I'm not trying to make light of it, but the human body and the human interaction with the environment is so exquisite, and we haven't even teased out a bit of it, all the tiny bits and fragments yet.
Right.
So I could see how Vincent, you're a strict behaviorist. You know, you talk about things like conditioning and operant behavior, and you know
Good old
how
Skinner, yay.
you know, rewards and punishments, you know, sticks, you know, carrots and sticks. I see that. I get that, especially this society we live in currently. I can see that being very, you know, very attractive. But there are other things, as I said, like the epigenetics, like how, you know, whatever is happening, even in the womb, impacts your genetics. You know, that's not learned, but it still impacts you. It could still have you come out, and we don't know, you know, we don't know the biology of mental illness for the most part. Some we do, some we've teased out, but why is this kid putting sticks in rabbits' eyes? We don't know that. We don't know why that happens.
Right.
So for some kids, maybe they did see it. Maybe they were a part of some, you know, sadistic behaviors that they were able to observe.
Cartoons.
You know, yeah. People blame it on video games. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to talk too much. I'd like to hear from our other.
Right. Aisha?
I think a really good hot topic you brought up, you know, video games, because it seems like, you know, that's what everybody talks about, how video games are making our children more violent. That's a big nature versus nurture, because, you know, what makes you violent? I mean, I'm not a violent person, but do I have that ability? I mean, I just think that, you know, we all can be in situations that make us violent, right? Protecting my children, for example. So, you know, I mean, what about like religiousness. I have 3 children raised in the same spirituality, same home, but some are more religious than others, or just more inclined, right? So, and all other kinds of things, even like, when we talk about body size, right? Let's talk about like our children, we're feeding them the same diet, yet, so we're talking about genetics now. So is it nature? Is it nurture? You tell me.
See, I wonder about that too, because, okay, we're all predispositioned for something. Okay. But in being predispositioned for something, like you said, Aisha, if in your household, all 3 of your kids are eating the same thing, I also believe that there is a certain level of nurturing to the body that happens depending on what you're eating, So what I mean by that is, let's take the cows, for instance, or even the chickens, and the antibiotics and the chemicals that they're feeding to them. I do believe, okay, that it looks like Mr. Ford is about to disagree with me, of course, but I do believe that those things change some things in some people. Again, medications will work for some people that may not work for me, and vice versa. Mr. Ford, you had an opinion.
If the chemicals they are feeding chickens and cows are affecting your behavior, I say you probably had too much CBD.
No. No. First of all, the chemicals that are being used to produce more meat, to make the animals larger so that they can produce more meat and everything, does affect us. First of all, them using growth hormone in the animals does take an effect on us. It's just a matter of how it affects you. You know what I'm saying? So in that case, is that not an influence of your environment? Just asking a question.
Does that influence your behavior though? But yeah, that's a point with respect to influencing your physical self.
Right.
Your phenotype is, there's been a study of young girls who begin their menses much earlier than decades ago. It's because it's dropping to an earlier and earlier age. Mm-hmm. Now, is it because of the additional things like hormones added to foods? There's a link. There's causality. I mean, not causality. There are correlations, and in some cases causality, but I can't just pull it out of my head right now. But there are correlations to that totally agree with that. Does that cause behavioral changes? I don't know. I honestly don't know, but I'd be willing to take a look at it and do a deeper dive. Right. Because if it's affecting your physical self, then who knows what impact these. We know that a mother, a pregnant woman carrying an infant, if she ingests something toxic or ingests some other kinds of drugs, it has an impact on the fetus. We know that. We know that. And so what kinds of impacts play out, with your behavior that's based on the genetic impact that you had in the womb? We're not really totally able to put those things together just yet. We can make correlation.
Right.
Not so much of it.
You bring up a good point that the outside environment, even before we're born, during our development stages, influences,
Absolutely.
us in the womb during brain development, during physical development and all like that. So by the time we're born, we've already been exposed to some of those outside influences.
You're just making the same argument for behaviorists, because this fetus is now hearing, feeling, sensing the stress of the outside world, and it is shaping their behavior. It is not shaping their genes.
I'm talking about toxins that do impact genes. We don't know if those toxins who knew about, remember, you can't forget about the uproar that was made about crack babies, even though it's been
Right.
disproven. You
Right.
know, it's like these crack babies are monsters. They're coming out. That was an argument based on genetic impact.
Mhm.
So from the toxins in the mom's womb. So I'm not a geneticist, and I can't say definitively whether this stuff can be proven or disproven. But I have my leanings. I have my
Don't we all?
suspicions. Right, we all do, don't we? So, and that's why I'm a firm fence sitter on this particular topic, because I can see the arguments of both.
Yeah, I see the argument on both sides. You know,
Yeah.
but I also do believe, I do believe some people are just born with certain things. I believe that some people are born intelligent, you know, and you can look at several artists who were born with, they weren't taught how to be painters. It was just something that was in them, you know. Musicians, look at Bach, look at Beethoven, you know, they were born with this musical inclination. Look at Michael Jackson. Let's put it like this. Let's bring it back to the 20th century. Look at Michael Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Some people are just born with certain genetic traits. And the thing is, I've seen it in families. I've seen it in my families. You know, there are many in my family who have the ability to sing. You know, and I don't mean we all can sing on the school choir, but I mean really sing, you know. And I do believe that's genetic. It's not learned. It's just kind of like at the age of 3, if you know, she opened her mouth and bellowed out, you know, the best version of the greatest love of all you ever heard, a 3-year-old, you know what I'm saying? That's not something she's taught. This is something that's already there. So I do believe there are certain things that's already there. And then as a result of them being there and someone noticing it, it now gets nurtured.
Yeah,
So
I
that it
agree
can
with
come
that.
out.
If
Yeah,
that
I agree.
3-year-old belted out such a wonderful version of the greatest love of all, where did she hear it first? How many times had she listened to it? She didn't just come up with her own creative version of the greatest love of all. Oh no, she probably sang it verbatim, note for note, riff for riff, that she heard it on the television, on YouTube, or whatever the screw heck it is. Learn
At 3?
behavior. Learn
At 3?
behavior.
But that's an argument for the both interactive.
Right.
So I know all of us have seen videos of this little 2-year-old drummer who was amazing.
Mhm.
He's phenomenal. Of course, he learned how to drum. He had a drum set placed in front of him at an early age. But my 2-year-old playing the drums is not going to sound like that 2-year-old.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying.
In fact, those drums probably wouldn't survive past the video with my 2-year-old. But yeah, so to me, Vincent, sorry, that's another argument. I know you're hardcore behaviorist. I get that.
Very hard.
I get it. There's nothing better. But to go back to a point that you made earlier, with regard to, you know, the succession of influences, like the parents come first, and then the peers, then the educators, and then the larger influences, culture, for lack of a better word. So wherever we find ourselves living, the culture, our particular culture, whatever culture exists in your home and then the larger community and then further and further out, those are all influences that will impact. And so that's given a nod to the behaviorists in the group.
Thank
But
you.
remember that I'm fair like that.
This is an argument we can have forever and ever.
I don't think it's going to be definitive. I don't.
No, it'll never be definitive. But I just do think that we are born with certain things. I think, again, I'm always going to I'm always going to lean on the side of, I believe we are born with certain characteristics, certain traits, and then our environment nurtures those characteristics. Not that we're born as a blank slate, and then we learn stuff as we go along that fills up that slate, and that's what creates us as, create our personalities and things like that. I mean, anybody disagree? Anybody agree?
There's something called epigenetics that suggests a combination of, it's a new field, right? And it's showing us that the environment can modify our genes. That's something that, I think we can appreciate that, because, just like we've been talking about, you've got, the nature part of someone, which is the genetics, and then you got the behavior side that's learned. And I do agree with that. I think we see both, that it's a combination and it can be modified.
So what about situations such as fear? Do you believe fear is learned, or is that something that's already inside of us?
Both.
Tabula rasa. Your mind is born as a clear page. And fear, you learn how to be afraid of water. You learn how to be afraid of
I believe that fear.
Doc is giving me
Hold on, let
Sabrina.
Sabrina answer. Go ahead.
It's definitely both, because you can learn certain fears as far as being afraid of water, but certain fears as far as when you're actually in danger, we're created with that, because our brain naturally fight or flight, and that we need that so that we know to stay away from things that are dangerous. But other fears, as far as just the things that aren't dangerous, I believe we can learn those type of fears. But there is a certain level of fear that we have to have just to keep us, to have us make, wise decisions. So
I don't know if all fears and phobias are learned. I remember being, 6 or 7 and going to camp and being told to, we were just learning to swim, and we were being taught how to tread water. And my parents did not swim. My mother and father did not take us to lakes and we went and swung off the vine and jumped in the lake. No, there was none of that. Okay. Even public pools we didn't do, because my mother always felt they were dirty. So we didn't do public pools either, but I do remember the first time when I was told to get in the water, I was afraid of getting in the water, and I have to ask, if it was that I was afraid because somewhere, Mr. Ford would say that somewhere in my subliminal conscious and my subconscious, that I had some sort of experience or exposure about being afraid of getting in the water. But as far as I remember, okay, there was never any of that. It was water. I didn't like it and was afraid to get in it.
mm-hmm.
What do you guys think?
Because your parents did not reward you for getting into the water. They subliminally put a fear of that thing called a pool. Like you said, your mom said that it was all dirty and you didn't want to go into it in the whole bit. So subliminally, you were put in there with a fear of water. You weren't born with a fear of water. They have taken babies, thrown them into a pool, not thrown, but put them into a pool, and they instinctively will start to swim. They're not afraid of it.
That does not happen. Please do not throw your grandchildren over into the pool, okay?
Oh, please. It's safe.
Do not do that.
But what about babies who are born in underwater, who give the childbirth that takes place in the pool? I mean, I think that this is my belief, is that most fears are learned.
Okay.
That most fears, our social scientist has pointed out to us, Sister Sabrina pointed out to us that Oh gosh, I forgot my point. See, this is a
That was a really
this is
important.
senior citizenship. Makes you forget your point.
She said senior citizenship.
It'll come back. It'll come back to me at some point, or not.
I think
But,
Dr. Strong,
but yeah, we do have this instinctive ability to be afraid of things. But for the most part, you know, kids are fearless. Young children are fearless unless they learn to be afraid. It's like, don't you touch that? We train them to fear most things that they're fearful of. Is what I wanted to say. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So how about the opposite? How about not being afraid?
Fearlessness, I think, is taught as well. But I think for the most part, young people come into the world fearless. They are taught to fear. They're taught to distinguish between things that they can conquer, like to walk into the street. How many 2-year-olds have stopped a heart by just walking toward a curb? You're like, ah! And then your reaction informs the kid how they should respond or not respond when they walk toward an intersection.
Gotcha.
So,
Aisha?
yeah, I was just gonna highlight Sabrina's point, which was really, I thought was interesting. The fight or flight that we have naturally innate in us. You know, I do believe, I think I stand for both. I do believe that fear is learned, but I also think it's naturally innate in us to sense fear and react. You know, and I can just share an example of myself. Like, I grew up in the suburbs. I didn't know what a roach was, but the first time I saw one, I screamed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And honest to goodness, like, and you know what's so funny? My son's grandma ordered a appliance, and in the box there was, I guess, a roach or whatever. And this was very recently. And he comes to me, he says, "Mommy, something's crawling. It's a beetle. It's a beetle. You got to come see this." I go and see it was a roach. So he's never seen it. He wasn't afraid yet. When I saw it, I screamed. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, the reason you screamed was fear of the unknown. Not that it was a roach, a beetle, or whatever. It was something that you were not familiar with, and that unfamiliarity gave you the fear.
But then would that not make it innate as opposed to her learning it? If she never encountered it and she never knew anything about it, okay, to fear it. The first time she encounters it and has a fearful reaction, would that not come from inside as opposed to her learning it?
No, because some other person would see the same thing and not freak out. So no, it's learned. Now,
Sabrina, what do you think about that? Sabrina?
Just say I'm right.
Well, I agree with Vince. I agree with you on the fact that hold on. Let me finish. I agree that
that was some learned behavior right there.
I agree that we naturally can sometimes fear the unknown, because it's not necessarily fear, but it could be like a lack of experience. Maybe if she saw the roach, maybe she's experienced other bugs. So maybe it's the fact that she just doesn't like, the bugs, or, if it wasn't necessarily a roach, but I do believe that there is a level of innate fear, and it can be, like I was trying to say, like we're born with fear because we have to have it, because that's what helps us to stay safe. But a lot of the times we fear things that we don't necessarily have to fear, but we still have the same feeling of fear. It's just it can be a lack of experience. Like, okay, for example, my daughter, she is terrified of tornadoes. She's never in her life experienced a tornado at all. She's never been around a tornado, but she has this fear of tornadoes. Every day she asks me, "Is it going to be a tornado today?" And I'm like, "No." But you would think that maybe there was something traumatic that happened where she's seen a tornado before, but she hasn't. She's just afraid of tornadoes. So, that's an example of just, you don't have to necessarily experience it to, be afraid of it. It's just, it's just it's, it's
Something
just
that's inside of
innate.
you.
Yeah.
Let me add something to that, Sabrina, because I think you struck a nerve for me. The issue, the mind really cannot tell the difference between something that is vividly imagined or something that is actually experienced. For example,
That's
you
true.
walk outside at night, you step on a curvy twig. Your mind says snake. Well, all right, my mind says snake. And I'm out of there. I ain't gonna lie. But I couldn't tell the difference between something that I imagined or something that was real. Now, to your daughter's point about being fearful of a tornado, has she seen the effects of tornadoes on television? And if she has, that has been subliminally put into her mind, tornadoes equal destruction. I don't want to be anywhere near that. So she learned to have that fear because she has seen perhaps the devastating effects of a tornado. Learned behavior.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question? I have a
Sure.
question. Okay, so what about, like, let's say something like our crying level, right? Does that reflect more of our nature or nurture?
That is
What do you
a
mean, like
great
temper
question.
tantrums?
No, like who cries and why and how you cry. I cry over everything, and my family. I'm the subject of mockery all the time about it. Cartoons, TV, anything that has some level of emotion. Is that genetic? Because no one else I know that in my family, well, one other person, does that, like graduations, anything. Is that a genetic component of my makeup? It's certainly not learned behavior.
I think it's
Because
genetic.
I'm mocked for doing it. If I had my way, I would never do it.
Right.
So
I'm just opinion, that's entirely my opinion. I think it is a learned behavior just based on your environment, how you grew up with a lot of trauma per se, or just like attachment styles and things like that. If I do believe that can stem from there, and I'm only saying that because I'm just like you. I can't even go to a wedding.
ridiculous. When we walk into a room, and they know that there's some emotional content, the first thing is everybody is looking at me. Passing tissue down to where that I don't think that's learned behavior because it's rejected by the majority of the people in my life. They find it amusing or disturbing.
So what do you guys think about emotions like depression or situations like depression? Can depression be learned?
Absolutely.
Or is that something that comes from inside?
I'm gonna say yes to that one. Just because
yes.
I grew up with a mom
yes
who was
on
very,
which way?
Well, I grew up with a mom who was very she just really took everything to heart, very sensitive. And I learned that, and I felt like now as a adult, I kind of react the same way that she would react. And believe it or not, I am correcting that for my kids because I don't want them to have that negativity where they're sad or something affects them to the point where they, can't function normally. So I am changing that, and I'm changing the lingo. My mom was very, she had like premonitions. She's very in tuned in that sense where she would say, I feel like something's going to happen. I remember growing up just hearing her say, like, I don't know, I don't feel good. Like, I feel like something's going to happen. I lived most of my adult life like that, thinking like, oh my gosh, like watching my back, like something's going to happen. And then I changed it. I was like, why am I doing this for my kids? Like my kids are looking at me, innocent little faces, looking at me like, Mommy, are you okay? And so I completely changed that about myself. Right. So depression is learned. and then there's clinical depression too. So, I mean,
Okay.
I'm giving you my,
Yeah.
Dr.
We have to,
Schofield,
we
you
have
wanted
to, yeah, I was gonna refute that depression is learned, because they're, we do lots of work and study around. And I'm glad you made the delineation between that
Clinical.
and clinical depression, because that's real. And that's for that, a lot of that, like schizophrenia. I have an adopted son who's schizophrenic, who was undiagnosed for much of his life. And there seems to be a very strong familial component to that, meaning genetic component. So you can't
can I just
can't
make
lay claim to those
Mm.
things being learned behavior.
I believe, and not only do I believe, but my mom is on medication for clinical depression. So she does have depression, and she would just react due to her depression. Now, I personally am not clinically or diagnosed depressed. However, I was picking up the behavior patterns.
Okay.
Everything I heard. And that's when, I realized very quickly what I was doing. I was just repeating, and I stopped myself.
Wow. I mean, I personally think it's a chemical imbalance somewhere, which could have been passed down from someone else, and that's
making it a genetic inheritance rather than
right.
Otherwise, why would the child of a schizophrenic have a higher percentage of being the possibility of becoming of being diagnosed with schizophrenia? So we have to look at those things and be really, because there's a lot that we inherit that is just straight out. We don't see it. We don't see the genes. We can't unravel them. We can, although the human genome's pretty much been completed in terms of being able to tell you what those alphabets are, but what they code for is another topic altogether. That's
absolutely,
that's still out there.
Absolutely. We're quickly winding down. Mr. Ford, I'm gonna start with you, and I'd just like for everyone to kind of give, just their last thoughts and everything before we leave the cafe. If we could start with you, Mr. Ford.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. First of all, thanks for having this conversation, because I think it's one that it's a conversation that and I'll just be very narrow in my scope, that we in the Black community don't necessarily have enough of. Speaking to that issue of crying, I will tell you that in the Black community for young boys, you are raised with the concept that you do not cry. You don't show weakness, because then someone else will pick on you. So I'm still a behaviorist. I appreciate all of the points of view that y'all that want to walk the fence have made. I believe you don't straddle the fence. You sit firmly on one side or the other, but that's okay. And Dr. Strong feels I can understand, because see, you've got the medical and the clinical. So, all right, you deserve to have that point of view. Seriously though, I appreciate your perspective on this. And for those of you that have multiple children, you see the differences in your children, and that's proof positive. I only have 2 boys, but that's another story, another show altogether. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Ford.
Thank
Aisha, your closing remarks, please.
Just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for your time and your perspective. It's such an interesting topic, and it's one of those debates that I don't think that'll ever be over soon. Thank you for
absolutely. Sabrina, Ms. Barnes.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. It's been interesting, and I agree with Aisha. I don't think it'll ever be a definite nature nurture. We all have opinions or viewpoints, but who knows for sure.
This is true.
But I just wanted to touch just real quick from a spiritual perspective. I believe that spiritually we all existed prior to being born into this physical realm. So I do believe that we are predisposed because, we're born with certain gifts and we're born with certain just inclinations to certain things. I believe that, what you were touching on a little bit about depression, I believe that, people who are more empathetic, they are more empaths, which tend to work in the medical field and the social work field and the field of being a healer. Empathy is a gift that that's given from God. And when you can feel sometimes the emotions of other people, you can mistake it as your own. But that's a deeper topic for another time. But I do just
And
want to say
we're
that.
gonna visit that too.
So I do just want to say that, more people are emotional, and that can be, a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing when you don't know how to manage it. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, and I thank you again. This was a great topic. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Also, Dr. Strongfield. We will, last but not least.
Hey, I'm glad you had me on tonight. It was a really interesting, fun topic to explore. I'm pleased to have met these really wonderful people on your panel. How'd you pull them together? They're really smart and able and capable. I really enjoyed it. So thanks for having me.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you all for coming into the cafe with me tonight. It was my pleasure to have, old friends back again. It's always a pleasure to have old friends in the cafe, because the comfortability level increases every time I have y'all back. And now we can talk about conversations that are a little bit more intimate than when we first met. And it's kind of like, well, I don't want to say this because I don't want to offend anybody. And I don't want to say that. And the more we get to know each other, the more open we are, which we need to be. We need to be able to talk about things in truth and in honesty. Because that's the only way we'll get to learn each other so we can have better relationships. To those of you in the cafe who were not on the panel tonight, thank you for joining us. We love you. We're so happy you were here. We hope that something we talked about tonight actually sparked a fire for you, made you either think about something or made you aware of something about yourself or someone else that you might want to address at some point. But neither here or there, whether your behavior or someone else's behavior is natural or it's nurtured, the bottom line is do your best to be a good person. That's it. At the end of the day, be a good person, because nothing beats you being a good person. We love you. We'll see you soon. Stay safe. Make sure you mask up.